Hello friends! Welcome back to the channel where we make pretty costumes and things. I'm absolutely obsessed with the Wednesday Addams TV show on Netflix, and everything she wears in this show is like absolutely amazing. So I thought it would be really fun to make a Wednesday Addams-inspired dress. In 2018, I bought a Wednesday Addams dress for this photo shoot here, and in 2019, I actually made a Morticia Addams dress. We're gonna be remaking this on this channel for Halloween, so stay tuned to the end of the video for more about that. But for this video, we are going to actually make something a little bit different from both of these and do our own kind of Wednesday inspired dress that I can wear every single day, or that I can pair with a wig and wear at a convention. So let's get started. I chose McCall's pattern 8239 for my base, and the major changes that I decided to make in order to make this dress personal to me was to lengthen the cuff. I wanted this to take up the majority of my forearm. I really wanted to make a super dramatic collar, and then I also wanted to have a nod to Wednesday's button up front, but I didn't want it to go all the way down the dress, so I have it end at the waist. I'm using black and white cotton broadcloth from my stash for this project. I'll be closing it with a zipper on the side seam, and I will also use buttons on the wrist and on the front that are all from my stash, just left over from old projects. I start by cutting out the pattern pieces I need for the look that I'm going, and then I set my iron to nylon or synthetic settings so that I can press my pattern paper flat. A fun tip for those struggling to get all the pattern pieces back in the envelope, I personally fold all of the pieces and then press the pieces flat in order for them to lay as flat as possible. From there, they fit back in the envelope, easy peasy. In order to modify my cuff, collar, and bodice front pieces, I'm going to need to transfer the current pieces onto some pattern paper. From there, I can draw on the adjustments that I want to make. I decided that I was going to cut everything out and then use the lining layer to make the mock-up and adjust what was cut later. The instructions have you stay stitch the back piece as well as a section of the front piece. To stay stitch, I shortened the length of the stitch length to a 1.5 millimeter and then stitch about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric so it will be encased in the seam. Then I can attach the side front to the front and the side back to the back at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Using my pressing ham, I press my seams open, and then I can attach the front to the back at the shoulders and the side seams. For the mock-up, I am attaching both side seams. However, when it's time to sew the actual dress, I will leave the right side seam open between the notches so that I can put a zipper in it later. So I am literally swimming in this. This is massive. This is absolutely, it looks like a men's tank top on me. Obviously, like this armhole is really nice, but I feel like it only feels good because it's so big. So I'm gonna make an adjustment really quick to at least the side seams, just really quick, and then let's come back to this. Okay, cool. I took off a 1/2 an inch at the front, and I also took in 1/4 of an inch on each side. And it seems to be fitting a little better, except for up in the top area, like around the bust. Not even just the bust, but like this area, like above the bust. It's just a little too loose. It looks almost like a t-shirt still. So I'm gonna actually take that in about a 1/2 an inch on each side as well, starting from here to the top, and then the same on the back. I'm going to start about like the bottom of the shoulder blade up to the top, just taking a 1/4 of an inch, and hopefully that will fix any bagginess up here. And then I can repeat that entire process on the next set of fabric, because these two together are gonna kind of like work as a lining and a top layer. So that's where we're at, making progress. I sewed the lining to the outer layer at the front seams and then flipped it so the right sides were on the outside, and from there I pinned the neckline, lining up the center back fold as well as the shoulder seams. Now I am going to stay stitch the neckline and then I can prepare to add the buttons. I only have 6 of these buttons, so the spacing on this front is determined by that. I marked the buttons with a white pencil. Before stitching on my actual bodice front, I did a test on some scrap fabric to ensure the placement of the buttons and the tension was perfect on my machine. Once I nailed those settings, it was time to stitch out all 6 buttonholes. Now let's talk about the sleeves. I started by adding gathering stitches to the top and bottom of the sleeve. A gathering stitch is basically a very wide stitch inside the seam line meant to be pulled in order to gather the fabric down later. It is often sewn with 2 to 3 stitches alongside it, but I walk on the wild side and only do one of these stitches. To sew the sleeve seam, I am going to use a French seam. So I start by sewing the piece wrong sides together at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then I press my thread and turn my sleeve so that the right sides are together, and then I press that. From there, I will sew about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, encasing the raw edge in the seam, and now I have fresh, clean seams for my sleeves. For the cuffs, I start by fusing some interfacing to one of the cuff pieces. I chose Dreamweave fusible interfacing so I could machine wash my dress when I'm all done. Then I can sew the 2 cuff pieces together, right sides together, making sure to leave a 1/2 inch gap from the edge of the cuff that will be getting attached to the sleeve. Now I am going to clip my corners, trim all 3 edges, flip my fabric right sides out, and press my cuff flat. After marking the center of the sleeve and the cuff, I will pin them together and pull my gather stitches so I can evenly distribute the sleeve gathers onto the cuff. Now I can sew this down, making sure that my gather stitch is inside my seam allowance. Then I will hand sew the inside cuff layer to the sleeve with a whip stitch. To attach the sleeve to the body, I'm going to line up the pattern markings and pin the sleeve to the outer fabric, then pull the gather stitches to ease the sleeve into place. From there, I can sew it. To clean up this edge, I will fold the lining over the seam and whip stitch it in place by hand. Moving on to the collar. I have my white cotton folded in half. On half of it, there is a fusible interfacing, and on the other half, it's left alone. I am going to trace my pattern piece onto one side of my fabric and then pin the folded fabric to the drawn fabric so I can sew the 2 together. Like with the cuff, I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch at the edge where I'm going to attach the collar to the bodice free. I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch inside the lines that I marked, starting at one side and making my way around to the other. I cut along the edge that I drew onto my fabric. Then I clipped the corners, trimmed the edges, and flipped the collar right sides out. Finally, I gave it a really good press before pinning it to my bodice. One thing I didn't account for when I was making adjustments to the pattern based on my size was that I would also have to adjust the collar. So when I went to pin the collar to the bodice, it was way too big. So I brought out my ruler and took off about 1.5 inches on each side of the collar. With these adjustments, I can get back to adding the collar to my bodice by pinning the wrong side of the collar to the right side of the bodice and sewing that down. Once it is sewn, I will clip the curve of the collar so that it will have an easier time turning. Then I can press the seam towards the collar and turn the top edge of the collar in by 1/2 inch. I will pin that down and slowly stitch over it, ensuring that the top bodice edge and the collar are all tucked nicely into this seam. Moving on to the skirt, I forgot to cut out a pocket, so grabbing my trusty pocket pattern, I cut out 2 halves of a pocket. Overlock the edges of both the pocket and the skirt seams, then measure from my waist to just above my knee so I can plan the placement of the hem. Then I can sew the pockets to the skirt pieces and the 2 skirt pieces together with the right sides together. I'm only placing 1 pocket on this dress because I have the zipper on the other seam and I personally hate adding pockets to a zipper. For the hem, I folded and pressed the edge of my fabric in by 1/4 inch and then again by another 1/4 inch to encase the raw edge. I stitched that down on my machine and now the skirt is ready to be attached to the bodice. I attached the skirt to the bodice with the right sides together, lining up all of the seams, the front seam, the side seam, and then I also left it open where the zipper is going to go. From there, I will take the lining fabric and I will actually fold and press it over this seam here and hand stitch it down all the way around to the other side. Then I'm going to attach my zipper in the side seam slot. Using my zipper foot, I start on one side of the seam and then move to the other side of the seam, making sure that I am not sewing the lining fabric into the zipper. The final step is to hand sew the lining into the zipper and then this dress is done. Okay, so I know that I finished the dress. It's all done, it's all sewn, but I'm not really loving the collar. So I'm going to rip it out and make some adjustments and sew it back in. I know this was supposed to be just a really simple dress, but I think that there are 2 parts of this costume or dress that like really made it something that I want to wear, and that's the sleeve and the collar. So if I don't nail the collar, in my opinion, I'm probably not gonna wear the dress. And I think that is not really fair to myself. So let's just spend an hour fixing the collar and getting it the way I want it, and then I'll maybe actually wear it. So I used my seam ripper to rip out the collar. Basically, I just ripped out that last stitching that I did. And then I also took my ruler and I use that to help me find a guideline to mark where I was going to sew, and then I basically just sewed this right back up the exact way that I stitched it before, and I liked it marginally better. Let's skip to the reveal. Okay, I was gonna try to slide in, but apparently my shoes and my floor don't like that. So, hi, here's our outro. Let's talk about this. Overall, I actually really love this. Here are the adjustments that I would like to make, and I'm going to make most of them. The collar is not the drama that I wanted. I'll show a picture of what I was hoping to create here. It didn't work. I haven't figured out how to make it work. I might look for a collar pattern on Etsy to kind of get an idea if like that exists, and then take this off and use that. But for now, we'll keep the collar. The adjustments that I can and will make are, the cuffs are still really big, so I think I'm gonna move the buttons over like 1.5 inches so that they fit kind of like this. And then like, I don't know if you can see that, but when this is like way more fitted, the poof drama, do you see that? Do you see that drama? Look at that. That's way better. So I'm gonna definitely move all the buttons over, and then I'm gonna take this in on this side by about 1 inch. I'll show you what I've done. I've secretly safety pinned it. So, secret. Actually, that's a thing I learned, like when I was younger, I used to model, and they used to take clothing clips and clip the backs of your outfits, I said costumes, outfits, so that they would fit better. That's the thing that they do. I do it with safety pins because I don't know, I don't have clothing clips, or like, you know, they're wooden, they're clips, they're for hanging clothes. Anyway, don't remember what those are called. I'm going to take this in about an inch, just like from the pocket to like like a little like up here, just to get a little bit of a cinch on here so that it actually has a definition. Yes. Other than that, this is like awesome. It's 100% cotton, so it's really breathable. And even in the winter, like it's 9 degrees out right now, I feel pretty good. Overall, my thoughts about this are that I should not have used this pattern. This pattern sucks. I should have just draped my own pattern because I've actually made something similar to this before for a Sabrina costume, and I don't know what I did with that pattern. I wish I kept it because that would have been great. Really liked that pattern, and I should have done something like that versus these weird boxy seams up here. This just isn't flattering. It's fine, it is what it is. I was also really concerned about the A-line skirt. I'm more of a circle skirt kind of girl. I like to hide my like legs with big fluffy skirts. So I was like, not sure about this A-line skirt thing. I actually really like it. It's really cute. So I'm glad that I did that. I really like it. And yeah, overall, I actually really love this project. Not the right pattern, not too excited with the collar, but these are things we can fix. It's a really good project. So now, let's talk about Halloween. Halloween is something that I see a lot of my favorite like Halloween YouTubers do. I don't know how to describe it. Halloween YouTubers is the best way I can describe it, but it's basically YouTubers that I follow that do like holiday decor hunting. A lot of them celebrate Halloween, and so they'll do kind of like a romantic, like a dark romantic theme for Valentine's Day. And I thought it would be really cool to do something like that for costuming or for like us here. And I feel like Morticia Addams is like the definition of dark romance in my book. There's a few others that I'm not going to name because I might be making them later this year. That's just like a character that I thought of. So I just kind of want to be like, hey, anyone that wants to make a kind of like dark romantic type costume for like Valentine's Day, maybe we can make like a Halloween costume 2023 hashtag on Instagram and like share each other and like, I don't know. Yeah, is that something? If it's something you're interested in, I will create a hashtag and use it as I make my Morticia Addams and share it on Instagram, and we can like have a group of us that celebrate like a gothic version of Valentine's Day. So that video about Morticia Addams will come out the week of Valentine's Day, probably on Valentine's Day. I don't really know. Don't know that week by heart, but like that's the goal. And basically on Instagram in my stories leading up to that day, I'll use the hashtag. I'll probably post throughout that week about the costume, and then the week after I'll share finished stuff. So maybe like that's a thing we can do, is we can just have like a hashtag and make like spoopy costumes, but in February. So that's just it. That's the Halloween thing. That's my idea. Please join me if you would like. And if you're on YouTube and you would like to also make something along those lines, there's no rules. I'll be really honest. Like, it doesn't take a lot to convince me that something is gothic and Valentine's. There's no rules. Just like make whatever that you feel. So if you like gothic costumes, please consider subscribing to my channel, because for Halloween this year, I will be making Mina's red dress from the 1992 Dracula. I will also obviously be making Morticia Addams for Halloween, which is in like a month. And then I have one more goth girl costume planned that I would like to make this year, but I might not get to it. So we're not gonna talk about it until I get to it. Anyway, I also make lots of costumes on this channel, so if you like that kind of content, subscribe. Give this video a like because it does help the robots understand that you like me. And I hope everyone had a really good holiday. I will see you all in the next video where we get back to working on the Not So Wicked Witch, Glinda. Talk to you then. Goodbye!